No one expects a Hollywood Christmas party to end in a nightmare, especially not when the guest list includes comedy legends, award-winning filmmakers, and people who've spent decades in the spotlight. But behind the smiles, tailored suits, and polite laughter, something was already unraveling. And by the time anyone realized how serious it was far too late. Because what happened next didn't just shock Los Angeles. It left investigators, celebrities, and an entire family searching for answers that still don't fully exist. And the first warning sign came from someone who didn't belong in the room. The party was hosted by Conan O'Brien, a polished, tightly run Hollywood event where everyone understood the unspoken rules. Formal attire, casual networking, quiet conversations between people who knew how to play the game. Rob and Michelle Reiner arrived together, familiar faces in that world. But Nick Reiner stood out immediately, not in a loud way, not at first. While others wore suits and dresses, Nick showed up in a hoodie. It wasn't just the clothes, though. According to multiple people at the party, something felt off almost instantly. Sources later claimed Rob and Michelle had insisted Nick attend because they were already worried about him. His mental state had reportedly been unstable in the weeks leading up to the event, and they didn't want him alone. But bringing him may have only exposed how serious things had become. Throughout the night, Nick reportedly approached guest after guest, asking the same 3 questions. Over and over. What's your name? What's your last name? Are you famous? At first, people brushed it off as awkward humor. Then it became uncomfortable, then concerning. Several attendees later claimed the repetition didn't stop. The same questions, the same flat delivery. No social awareness, no shift in tone, just a loop that made even seasoned celebrities unsure how to react. And then came the moment that people still talk about in hushed conversations. Nick reportedly approached Bill Hader, who was deep in a private discussion. Hader, trying to be polite, allegedly acknowledged him and asked for a moment of space. Nothing aggressive, nothing dramatic, just a boundary. Nick didn't respond. Instead, witnesses say he stood there, staring, silent, unmoving. A 1,000-yard stare that lasted long enough to unsettle everyone nearby. Then, without saying a word, he reportedly stormed off. That was when Rob stepped in. Sources claim Rob pulled Nick aside shortly after, frustrated and embarrassed by what had been happening all night. The conversation quickly turned tense. Some reports described it as explosive. Others later walked that back, saying it wasn't loud. But it was serious. A father confronting a son whose behavior had crossed a line. Either way, the message was clear. Something wasn't right. Rob and Michelle left the party not long after. No grand exit, no scene. Just a quiet departure that, in hindsight, feels heavy. No one seemed certain when Nick left. But by the early hours of the morning, he had checked into a hotel in Santa Monica. Around 4 a.m., according to eyewitness accounts, Nick appeared disoriented, agitated, not fully present. He used his credit card, got his room, and disappeared behind the door. What happened inside that room remains one of the most disturbing unanswered parts of this entire story. Because when housekeeping entered later that day, nothing looked normal. The windows were covered with bed sheets, blocking out daylight. The bed was stained with blood. So was the shower. It wasn't a small amount. Enough to immediately raise alarms. And Nick was gone. No luggage. No explanation. Just a room that suggested something violent had happened, or was about to. While police began piecing together what the hotel scene meant, something else was unfolding across the city. Something that early reports would later get very wrong. Sunday afternoon, just before 3 p.m., Rob and Michelle's massage therapist arrived at their home for a routine appointment. This was normal. She'd been there many times before. But that day, no one answered. She tried the doors, locked. She called Rob, nothing. Michelle, no response. At first, it may have felt like a scheduling mix-up, but as minutes passed, concern turned into fear. That's when she contacted Romy. Romy Reiner lived nearby. She was only 28 years old. When she got the call, she didn't hesitate. She grabbed her roommate and went straight to the house. What she walked into would change her life forever. Romy entered the home and found her father. The shock was so overwhelming that she fled almost immediately. In her panic, she didn't even realize her mother was also inside the house, gone as well. That realization would come later, adding another layer of horror to an already unbearable moment. In the chaos that followed, Romy made a phone call that quickly spread through Hollywood. According to reports, she called family friend Billy Crystal before authorities arrived. Her roommate was the one who called 911. When police got there, Romy told them something that immediately shifted the direction of the investigation. Nick was missing. She reportedly warned officers that Nick lived in the guest house on the property and wasn't there. She referenced his struggles with mental health and substance issues, not as an accusation, but as fear. Fear that something terrible had happened and that he could be dangerous. That was enough. Nick Reiner was placed at the top of the suspect list almost instantly. Hours later, police found him about 20 miles away near the USC campus in downtown Los Angeles. Surveillance footage captured the moment. Squad cars surrounding him, officers moving in. Nick standing there, looking detached, almost empty. He was taken into custody and later charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder. For many people watching from the outside, it seemed like the story had reached its grim conclusion. But the internet wasn't done digging. And what resurfaced next reopened uncomfortable questions. An old YouTube video, posted 9 years earlier. In the video, Nick appears healthy, alert, confident. He plays a character named D.D. David, a parody of a music mogul, wandering around with an interviewer filming his day. He jokes, he laughs, he spends time with friends. He even appears alongside his sister Romy, casually hanging out in their backyard. At first glance, it's harmless, almost charming. But there's one moment that people can't stop replaying. Nick pretends to do drugs. Then, seemingly joking, he makes a violent remark toward a dog sitting nearby. At the time, it likely registered as dark humor. Nothing more. But now, in light of everything that's happened, some viewers see it differently. It's important to say this clearly. There is no evidence that the video predicts what would happen years later. Many people joke. Many people say things they don't mean. But the contrast between that version of Nick and the man seen in recent photos is impossible to ignore. In newer images, he looks drained, hollow, like someone who hasn't slept or eaten properly in a long time. Reports suggest his mental health had been declining for years. Friends allegedly noticed mood swings, isolation, erratic behavior. But as with so many situations like this, the warning signs only seem obvious after everything falls apart. And that's where this case becomes more than just a headline. There are still massive gaps in the timeline. Investigators haven't publicly explained what caused the blood in the hotel room. They haven't clarified when the attacks occurred, or what Nick did in the hours between the party, the hotel, and his arrest. Rumors online range wildly, but very few facts have been confirmed. What we do know is this: a family was shattered, 2 lives were lost, and a young woman was left to discover a scene no one should ever have to witness. Behind the fame, the red carpets, and the carefully managed public images, this was a private collapse that unfolded in plain sight. And no one knew how to stop it. And maybe that's the most disturbing part. Because this didn't come out of nowhere. It crept in quietly, through awkward moments, repeated questions. Concern brushed aside, until suddenly there was no going back. And as more details emerge, one question still hangs in the air, unanswered. Could this have ended differently? If someone had realized just how serious it had become?